One of the theories for how the Indo-European languages spread is the nomadic warrior thesis. The nomadic warrior thesis states that the first Proto-Indo-European speakers were the Kurgan people, whose homeland was in the steppes near the border between present-day Russia and Kazakhstan. Kurgans were nomadic herders and excellent warriors, and were among the first people to domesticate animals. As they traveled west and south throughout Europe, Southeast Asia, and Iran, the Kurgan warriors conquered much of Europe and Southeast Asia, spreading their language. And if you look at the map over here, you can see that originally, in by 4000 BC, the Kurgans had spread from their hearth near the border of Kazakhstan and Russia near the present-day border of Kazakhstan and Russia, and had spread by 4000 BC to present-day Ukraine and the Caucasus region, and then by 3000 BC had spread throughout most of the Balkan region and Eastern Europe, and eventually by 2000 BC had spread across Europe, the Middle East, and South Asia, and eventually they moved on further to Tibet and East Asia, including modern-day China. And throughout this entire process, over millennia, they brought their language with them, their Proto-Indo-European language, as it evolved, as it took on the characteristics of minor languages in these other areas, but the spread of the language was spurred by the Kurgan invasions. In contrast to the nomadic warrior thesis about how Indo-European languages spread, another thesis explaining the spread of the Indo-European language family is the sedentary farmer thesis. This thesis argues that the first speakers of Proto-Indo-European lived 2,000 years before the Kurgans in eastern Anatolia and current-day Turkey. It is believed that they diffused east towards Greece and later towards Italy, Sicily, Corsica, and the Mediterranean coast of France, Spain, and Portugal. They then perhaps diffused throughout the rest of Europe, forming the various language branches of Indo-European, including Germanic and Slavic. But unlike the nomadic warrior thesis, supporters of this theory argue that Indo-European diffused through Europe and Southeast Asia through agricultural practices rather than through military expansion and invasion like the Kurgans did. The language grew more influential because the speakers became more prosperous through farming rather than relying on hunting, as peoples throughout current-day Europe and Asia slowly adopted the methods of farming that the Anatolian people spread throughout the rest of Eurasia. Thus, the language of Proto-Indo-European also spread and took on local characteristics until the Indo-European language family had been established and could trace their roots back to the Anatolian hearth. This is the model believed by proponents of the sedentary farmer thesis. Between the nomadic warrior thesis and the sedentary farmer thesis, I side more with the sedentary farmer thesis. This is because the sedentary farmer thesis complies with current understanding of the development of larger human civilization, as it is believed that agricultural practices as we know them today and urban settlements as we know them today first began in eastern Anatolia. Furthermore, the Anatolian hearth explanation, or the sedentary farmer thesis, also clearly explains the progression of Indo-European language development, especially how the language development began first with the Romance languages in Portugal, Spain, and France, and later Italy, and then the Germanic languages in Central Europe and Northern Europe, and then the Slavic languages in Eastern Europe. This goes with the map on the sedentary farmer thesis slide, because here we can clearly see that the people of the Anatolian hearth, the speakers of Proto-Indo-European, first journeyed to Western Europe, where they branched off into the Romance languages group, and then Central Europe, where they branched into the Germanic languages group, and then Eastern Europe, where they branched into the Slavic group, and then even after that, they spread to Asia, where they branched into the Indian language group and then the Sino-Tibetan language group. And overall, I feel that this makes the a sedentary farmer thesis a much more believable and valuable thesis than the Kurgan hypothesis, because I feel that the Kurgan or nomadic warrior hypothesis simply occurs too quickly for what I believe is the proper amount of time that it takes for such an immense language group to diffuse.